All right, I want to talk about near-death experiences, like a real near-death experience. Not I thought I was about to die, but the actual psychological event that happens when someone is close to or enters into being dead. Studies done that show that people that have experienced this have some similarities, like seeing a bright light, seeing deceased loved ones or spiritual figures, a life review, a feeling of calmness or euphoria, or feeling like you're pulled back to life. I had a near-death experience when I was 19 years old. It was July 13th, 1999, Panama City Beach, Florida. We had been partying all day long on the beach, and at one point that night, my friends jumped into the ocean. I didn't. As we were walking back to our hotel, we walked past a business, and there was a car parked there with two men leaning against the car. They immediately struck up a conversation with us. At one point, they suggested riding up and down the strip with them. This wasn't uncommon back then. This was Panama City Beach in the 90s. Plus, we were a little too intoxicated. My friends, who were wet from being in the ocean, decided to walk next door to the motel and change their clothes, which left me alone with those two guys. And they lured me into their vehicle. At first, I thought we were just going to cruise up and down the strip. But we got to the end of the strip and we kept going over the Hathaway Bridge. And that was the first moment where I realized something was wrong. And I asked them where we were going. They said they had to stop by a friend's house real fast. When we got into Panama City, we went into a residential area and we pulled off next to a ball field. The driver got out and went out behind the dugout. At this point, I knew I was in trouble and I didn't know what to do. The driver eventually called for me to come back behind the dugout. He said, "Hey, where's your money at to pay for this?" I asked him to pay for what? He said the weed. I said, "I don't have any money. I never said I wanted any weed." He was like, "You don't have any money?" And I said, "No, man, I have $20. Here, you can have it." At that time, the passenger came up and he handed me a bag that was clearly a newspaper sack full of grass. And the driver said, "Go ahead and smell it." So I opened it up, and before I could say it smells like grass, the passenger and hit me in the back of the head. I went down. They both began kicking me in the face. That knocked me out. I came to, and they were rummaging through my pocket. I tried to pull back and say no, and they stood up and started kicking me in the face again. I was knocked out again. When I came to the second time, I was on my back, and one of them was straddled over top of me, and he was choking me. I tried to say something, and he said, "You're a dead motherfucker now." I went back out. It was here when I had the near-death experience. I remember seeing a light and feeling like I was being pulled towards the light. And I remember I did a life review and my whole life flashed before my eyes. And I thought about my family, and I had accepted death because I remember thinking how upset they were going to be when they found out that I was dead. And the whole time I felt like I was floating up and outward, and I was in no pain. And then suddenly I was just pulled back, and I sat up and I gasped for air, and it was dark, and I was in the shadow behind the dugout. I don't know how long I was out. The men were long gone. There was just calmness and stillness. It was the middle of the night. And I ran to the nearest house and I started banging on the door, panicked. The porch light came on and some old lady said, "What do you want?" And I said, "Call the police." She said, "I already have." And I just turned and I went and I sat in the middle of the road until the police came. Don't remember a lot about that. I remember them taking some pictures. They drove me back to my hotel in Panama City Beach. We had drove my truck down there. So my friends took my truck back to Georgia and I went to the next city over where my girlfriend was vacationing with her family. And they took me in for several days, which again was very, very nice of them. They had messed me up pretty good. They had busted out several teeth on the backside of my mouth, about 4 different ones back here. They burst a blood vessel in my eye. It was red. My eyes were both swollen. Obviously had marks around my neck where they tried to choke me. And let's be honest, there's probably some TBI in there. I didn't realize how much traumatic shock that I was in. Another part of this story is that 1 month later, I was on a gun range when my dad shot my friend who was standing next to me. That was an accident, but that's a whole nother story. But I was kind of a wreck. I was drinking really heavily and I just compartmentalized all of it. I didn't think about it until halfway through the first semester of my freshman year of college. I took this literature class and I didn't go to it at all. I was failing it. I didn't do any of my assignments. I didn't even drop it. I had to just take the L on it. But I also joined a fraternity, again, drinking really heavy, partying my ass off. And then one day I decided to actually go to this literature class. And come to find out, they had an assignment to read this book called Life After Life, which was a study of near-death experiences. And I'm like, oh my God, I didn't read the book. And to make matters worse, he wanted to go around the room and everybody stand up and talk about something they learned in the book. And I'm just like, oh my God, this is nightmare scenario. But fortunately, I was towards the middle back of the room. So I was like, I'm gonna fake it till I make it. People start going around and talking about the book and describing near-death experiences. And here I am, 3 months after this event happened. Hadn't processed the first thing about it. Didn't know what a near-death experience was. And people start describing describing the light, the flashbacks, the feelings. And I'm sitting there like I'm in a therapy session. Every time somebody stands up and talks, I'm having a flashback. And for the first time thinking about it and processing it. And finally it gets to me and I'm just balled up inside like, what the I didn't know what to do, so I just stood up and I said, I'm going to be honest, I didn't read the book, but everything you're saying I can relate to, and I want to tell you my own experience. And I started trying to tell the story, and I got halfway through it, and I broke down crying so bad that I couldn't talk. And I'm standing there, this freshman in college, in front of this whole class. I was so embarrassed. I just sat down. I put my head down in my arms, and I was just tore up. I never went back to that class. And I still didn't process that for years later. But at that moment, I had realized that I had had a true near-death experience.